Okay, welcome to my ELM test prep series. I'm James S. And I want to talk about some general ideas of algebra. We all had math at one point, and we added numbers and subtracted numbers and did things like that. And maybe even we said 2 plus what equals 5. We may have had a fundamental equation kind of statement where we use numbers. Well, in general, algebra has those same general ideas, but for the most part we use letters. Nice. Handwriting is not the name of this course. Alright, so we might say 2 plus x equals 5. Well, all we've done is changed our what statement to a letter here, and we're asking ourselves, if this is true, then what does x equal? Well, of course, we know that x equals 3 because 2 plus 3 is 5. And there's no real mystery in that kind of statement. So let's start with a fundamental element of algebra, the term. And a term is nothing more than a letter, a number, maybe a letter number combination, maybe several letters. The one thing that these all have in common is there's no plus or minus between any of the letters. Oops, I put B there twice. Could be any number of letters there, of course. Well, all we know about A at this point is that it's A, and that 3 is 3, and 3A is really 3 times A, whatever A is, and this one here is 2 times A times B times whatever other terms are out there. But we don't know any values. All it is a term. It's part of what we're going to use as a fundamental building block of our language of algebra. So if I have a couple terms, we would call that an expression or a statement. If cows fly, okay, or when cows fly, or Scooby-Doo, or, yeah, I know I'm dating myself on that one. But we're not doing nothing more than saying that we're adding A, whatever that is, to B, whatever that is. It's just a statement. We have not declared any relationship to some value in which we might want to be able to solve this. We don't know what A is, we don't know what B is. So it's just an expression. It has a plus. Oh, we could have a minus here too. It wouldn't make any difference. Both of these would be expressions. The plus and minus here, you can think of those as commas or semicolons if you were doing English. We're separating these two terms. We're separating the A term from the B term. If I do anything in here as a quantity, I would have to do it to both terms. If I were multiplying this whole thing times 2, well, I'd have to multiply 2 times both the terms, 2a plus 2b. And lots of times we do that. We merely remove parentheses, or we simplify. We call that simplifying when we remove parentheses and combine like terms. Well, let's put a general basic equation. X plus 5 equals 7. Well, obviously, we're adding x to 5 here, and we're ending up with 7. And we say, oh, gee, that's not hard. X equals 2. And there's nothing difficult about that. You're making it too simple. Well, you're right. But let's look at the process that we would want to do here. We're adding 5 to x to get this value over here. Well, I want to undo. I want to solve for this. Let's say that it wasn't all that obvious to me. I want to solve for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo what I did mathematically here. I added 5, so I want to take 5 away. I want to undo that operation. Well, whatever I do to the left side of an equation, I must do the right side. So I'm going to subtract 5 from that side of the equation also. Well, 5 take away 5 from our basic math, we know that's 0. So x plus 0 is just x. 7 take away 5 is 2. And lo and behold, we have our solution. Well, we knew that in the first place, so there's no real surprise there. Let's make this a little more difficult. Alright, we've got a little more difficulty factor here, and I'm not going to make it that easy for you. You say, well, we just simply multiply both sides by 3 and get rid of our fractions. So I'm going to just make that a little bit more difficult. Well, I have two terms here, my x term and my math term, and I want to undo that. I'm subtracting 1/2 from this x quantity here. So I want to do that first. Well, if you remember back to PEMDAS, P-E-M-D-A-S, our order of operations, parentheses, exponents, multiply and divide, add and subtract. Normally when we do an expression mathematically, we go from left to right. When we undo that, we want to go the opposite direction. So one of the things we're going to look at first here is we're going to undo the add and subtract operations involved here. Well, I took 1/2 away, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to add 1/2. And I'm going to add 1/2 to the other side also. Well, plus 1/2 minus 1/2 goes to 0. We knew that was going to happen because that's what we wanted to happen. And over here, we're going to add, so this is now 5 and 1/2. Well, I'm multiplying now. I've got x times some quantity and divided by some quantity, and multiplied by 2, divided by 3. So if I'm in this multiply divide section, I'm going to undo that. I'm dividing by 3, so to undo that, I'll multiply by 3. I'm multiplying by 2, so I'm going to undo that and divide by 2. Well, multiply and divide, those cancel, those cancel. I'm left with x. And then I have to do the same thing on this side, multiply by 3/2. Almost forgot that, didn't you? Well, as long as I do the same to both sides, I'm good. So now my final answer is x equals 5 and 1/2 times 3/2. And of course, we could do the math on that, but I'm more interested in the operation that we did to get there than the actual answer. Alright, so let's look at another one. Well, let's do this. Again, I have a fundamental equation here. This quantity equals this quantity. I have two variables here. I have what would be called a independent variable. Means that you give me an x and then I can tell you what y is. And so y becomes a dependent variable. It's dependent on whatever value you give me for x. You pick an x value and then I can tell you what y is. Your speed down the highway is dependent on the acceleration and things going around. So your speed is the dependent variable, and anything else that's going into that is going to be your independent variable. Alright, so y equals 2x plus 5. Well, if I wanted to solve for x here, and quite often this would be the kind of thing that will happen to you, is they'll give you several letters and they'll say, we'll solve it in terms of this. So I added 5 to my 2x quantity, so I'm going to undo that. I'm going to subtract 5, and I'm going to subtract 5 from here also. Well, 5 take away 5 is just 0. Over here, y minus 5 is just y minus 5. I don't know what y is, but I'm taking 5 away from it. I'm still left with 2x over here. And now, the process here, I'm taking 2 times x. So to undo that 2 times, I'm going to undo it by dividing by 2. And over here, I'm going to divide the whole thing. Or if you want to divide them individually, it doesn't matter. But I'm going to divide that by 2, divide this by 2. And now I have x equals y y minus 5 over 2. And there is my answer in terms of x. Now, just real quickly, let's do something they might give you. 2ab over c equals 5. And they say solve this equation for the variable b. Well, this is the one I want to solve for. Well, I'm multiplying 2a times b here, and I'm dividing by c here, right? So here's one thing I'm doing. I'm multiplying by that and dividing by that. Well, let's undo this. Let's divide both sides by 2a. And we're going to multiply, because there's no add or subtract here, all my operations are in the same grouping, multiply and divide. So I'm going to multiply, I'm dividing by c, so I'm going to multiply by c. And over here I'm going to multiply this side by c. Alright, this 2a cancels that, this c cancels that. I now have b by itself, and over here on this side it is equal to 5 times c divided by 2a. And this is typically the kind of problem that they might ask you to do in this test. They'll give you some basic equation and then say solve for this particular letter. And it's just a matter of juggling things around and undoing what you're doing to it. If I had had a plus in here, I'd have had to take care of that first and then do the multiply and divide part. Alright, so there you go. Basic fundamental idea of algebra and solutions. Hope this was informative. Have a good day.